Liverpool look to have resolved the future of two of their brightest stars ahead of next season. Now, to assess the impact of that on the team, as well as what Arne Slot might want to do next season, we've got two of the best in the business, JJ Bull and John Mackenzie. Right, JJ, let's start with this. Liverpool fans must be delighted. Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah look to be secured for another couple of seasons. So Liverpool have done well there, but unfortunately it looks like Trent Alexander-Arnold is going to be going to Real Madrid. Now, before we look ahead to what that means for next season, talk to me how Arne Slot has got the best out of those three players.
Well, he's made some changes to make it more like what he probably wants his team to look like, but hasn't changed everything because it did work before. One obvious change is that the formation has changed to more of a 4-2-3-1 rather than the 4-3-3 that we know they had under Jurgen Klopp. But there are some more subtle differences if we look at some data, like this from Photovision. What we'll observe here if I flick between two different slides is that some of the colours and numbers change. Now, you might wonder what on earth is going on there, and I can tell you. What is going on there is it shows us the Slot's team is defending a bit higher up the pitch. He's a bit more, not aggressive so much, but like they just push higher. They want to win the ball higher up the pitch than what Jurgen Klopp did. And that means they also defend in a mid or a low block slightly less as well. So they want to be higher up the pitch, play a higher line as well. That's what they do. But the really important thing in those numbers and the colours that change on the lovely wheels is that the percentage of defensive transitions leading to counter-attack numbers are much lower. So it's showing that they are better at protecting against defensive transitions, which is helped by them being so high up the pitch, but they just can be better at managing those transitions that opposition teams are making against them.
Well explained.
So they're not getting as many Thank you, I'm glad that worked, because oftentimes it's hard to do that. But the main differences really are that Liverpool are, under Arne Slot, more patient, less chaotic and more controlled. So that's more what he wants. You think of Jurgen Klopp as being the all-action, heavy metal football? Well, now we've got
mid-metal.
Not so metal.
Like it's like yacht rock, but played by a punk band. So like Doobie Brothers played by Blink-182, something maybe like that.
I'm still trying to imagine it.
It doesn't really work.
Going.
Doesn't really work. I'll use some actual data instead to go better than that. So what you can really see here is the differences in how Klopp is a bit more wild, and then you've got Slot who's a bit more controlled. Look at patient attack. So it's much higher here under Slot this season. And also what you see is chance prevention at the top. So I think these kind of go hand in hand. So you get a higher shot quality because you've got more of patient attacks. You're building better chances, maybe not quite so many, but also your chance prevention is higher. So they've got players in the right positions to protect against counterattacks especially. So teams aren't getting good chances against them, but they're also creating high quality shots. But it's all about patience and control. There's even more subtle differences, like even how they build up. So a lot of teams defend in different ways in the Premier League. So what Slot's doing now is pulling the centre-backs really wide apart when he builds up a lot of the time. It changes from game to game, but what you get is this real distance between the two centre-backs, and this does a couple of things. It means you've got wide players here, so you can move your full-backs in different positions higher up, but it also means that the opposition has to figure out how to press you, because if you press them with two, you'll be split apart, which leaves space in the middle to pass through, which is obviously too easy to do. You don't want that. So then you see the second line of players. You've got the right back who's moved inside to be inverted kind of in here in the half space. The left back is still wide here. But you've got these two lines of defence. Oftentimes the teams will press them and push them into one position. Or they'll form a back three. The back three, you'd think if it's just spacing out normally, it'd be one in the middle and two either side. But if you look at it just from one side of the pitch, one player will drop in to form this wide three. But you're still creating that distance between them so you can move the fullback into somewhere else. So you've got options to progress through central positions. And the goalkeeper counts as part of this. So I think that's Kelleher, isn't it? But if he moved over more to our left, his right, then you'd have another option which is a bit deeper. So you've got depth to pass between, you've got width to be able to pass forward, but it means you can use that to manipulate your position to pass through central lines. That's what he's doing. He likes this. Here's them doing it against PSG. Again, you're just seeing this like massive split. But what we're going to show here is how they're using different players in different ways, maybe what Jurgen Klopp is doing. So defenders are split here, and then Alexander-Arnold is going to appear in this half space bit. And because he's in this position in the wide half space, he can either then go and overlap Mo Salah, or he can move inside to be more of a midfielder. Because Alexander-Arnold actually playing this half space role, he's been playing a bit more this season as a normal fullback.
Okay.
I would say perhaps 2% more.
He's a better fullback by 2%.
Well, not better. He just is more of a fullback. So like you think of fullbacks as being the wide players, and that's kind of what he's doing, because we know that last season he was more of a, like in England he was playing as a number 8 or like
as a midfielder.
Exactly.
Predominantly.
So he can do that, and that's useful, but Slot does use that sometimes, but he likes more of the overlap, I think, just being wide, and it helps because one of the things I think Slot also likes is having, especially on the right side, is Salah can play left-footed crosses inside to the back post rather than curled ones round with the right foot, and that maybe helps if you've got that sort of situation going on. And so one of the things that Klopp was very heavy on was having these wide triangles, these rotational triangles in wide areas. So it would be like Salah, Alexander-Arnold, and the right-sided player, maybe Jordan Henderson in the past. What you've got now is the same sort of thing under Arne Slot to show how it's not really that different in certain aspects of their attacking. So what you have here is Szoboszlai, Alexander-Arnold, and Salah, who'll be in a triangle here. Now it's a line that's not a triangle. You probably could make it a triangle if you tried, but it wouldn't look like one really. And they move on, and the triangle reforms, and it gives you options to pull apart the opposition defending, because if you're marking man-to-man and someone's overlapping and someone's underlapping, you're not sure who, someone's got to go with someone, which then puts your defensive shape into something you don't want it to. It's harder to organise against. And so as they move up the pitch, they keep moving and shaking, and you've got Salah can cut inside, Alexander-Arnold can go outside, vice versa, who's going to go with who, and eventually they do it to pull apart defence. Alexander-Arnold gets in behind as more of a traditional right back, or an attacking one anyway, gets to the box, sets up Salah, here's your triangle here, as Salah scores the goal. Because the important thing to remember is that triangles never die, but also the team hasn't really changed an awful lot, they've changed slightly. It's a slight evolution, which is good, because it makes perfect sense, because they were already very good. There's no point breaking it if it works. And what Klopp did was bring in some of the best players in the world, put that system in place. It worked well. Slot just changed a little bit of it, and it's really worked. But what happens when those players leave?
Good question. Trent Alexander-Arnold, big loss potentially to Liverpool fans. I know, it's sad. But he will be replaced at some point. I'm interested to know what the ripple effect of him leaving Liverpool will actually be.
Well, before we talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold specifically, how he's replaced, I think it's important to think a little bit about what replacing a player looks like.
Okay.
Because I think the temptation is always to think, as a fan looking outside in, well, we've got this player who does this thing. What we need to do is find another player who can do this thing, so there's not much of a drop-off, which, would work. But I think that the way that clubs think about it is, well, this player is doing certain things. He's a bit of a unicorn player. Trent Alexander-Arnold is doing things that most other players can't. It's unlikely that we'll be able to immediately replace that guy. You'll probably want to bring someone in who you think will eventually reach that kind of level, unless you're spending a lot of money and bringing someone in. Even if you do that, it's unlikely that they're going to be doing exactly the same things that he's doing. And so what you have to start thinking about is recreating the impact of that player, but in the aggregate, which is, I think it's a phrase from Moneyball. The idea in Moneyball is that if you can't get the perfect player, what you can do is you can spread the qualities of that perfect player around a number of different players. So to illustrate that, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold on the board here. The big question for Liverpool with Trent Alexander-Arnold is, how do you reproduce his creativity? Because if we think about where the creativity is coming from now, so these are creativity tokens on the board. Let's say Mohamed Salah, lots of assists this season, so a chunk of creativity coming from him. Let's maybe give one to Szoboszlai as well. He's the sort of more attacking of their midfielders, playing behind that front line, so a chunk of creativity coming from him. But then most of their creativity then is coming, you'd say, from Alexander-Arnold. So the big question is, how do you get...
He's a greedy creator.
He is. How do you get these three creative tokens across the team?
Right.
You could bring in someone who has the same level of creativity. I think that would be difficult to do in this instance, especially because Trent Alexander-Arnold is a fullback and creative players don't tend to be in fullbacks. It actually, as an aside, the reason why the creativity is coming through the fullbacks for Liverpool is because of Jurgen Klopp. Because when Klopp arrived, he wanted to play this intense counter-pressing football, which meant that he needed a functional midfield. So you remember that midfield of Henderson, Milner, Fabinho.
Yes.
The big question always was, how do we fit a bit more creativity into that midfield without losing the intensity that makes our counter-pressing so successful? The solution to that was, well, we bring in Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson on the other side, and as a result, we try and push the creativity out into those areas. And there was a season where those two were getting loads of assists. Between the two of them, they got the record for fullbacks. So that's why the creativity is in this area. Now that presents a benefit to Slot, I would say, because that means that he can say, well, it's great. I've been able to benefit from having Trent Alexander-Arnold in this position, but now he's going, I could maybe do something slightly different with this position. I can think about moving the creativity elsewhere. We talked about Robertson already. He's in the final 12 months of his contract or going into, so there's a possibility that he'll be moving on at some point. That gives you a really good tactical advantage, because you can then think, well, let's think about the fullback pairing as a pair. Maybe we can bring in someone different on the other side. So, for example, Trent Alexander-Arnold is backed up by Conor Bradley, who's an exceptional fullback prospect, and I think they'll probably just be able to throw him in and use him from the off. that means that you can maybe think about spreading some of the creativity onto the other side, because Bradley is a bit more of a traditional fullback, so you could maybe use him in the same way that Robertson's been using, and then think, well, could we get the more creative fullback over on the other side, potentially? One of the things you could then do is you could maybe have this new fullback coming inside, pushing Alexis McAllister up down the field, and then what you're able to do is actually push a little bit more creativity into this area. Use the creativity that McAllister already has by moving him forward, and getting the benefit of that as well. So what we're talking about when we're talking about moving the creativity around the field isn't even necessarily finding new players who can bring that creativity. It's about actually asking tactical questions. How can we utilize our players better in order to bring them through? So this is what I think we need to have first and foremost in our minds when we're thinking, how do you replace Trent Alexander-Arnold? Is it the case that we'd have to look for the next Trent Alexander-Arnold? I think not. I think what Slot and the recruitment team at Liverpool will be doing is thinking in terms of how do we spread his creativity around the team in different ways to give us not only other tactical advantages, but actually make us a little bit more of a well-rounded team as well.
Yeah, on that, should we also be thinking about the replacement for Andrew Robertson? Because the name Kirkes, the name Robinson have been floated around the media. And what would those kind of players offer Liverpool if they were to replace Andy Robertson?
Well, I think we need to have a little think about what it is that Slot's doing with his fullbacks in order to answer that question. JJ's already talked about how Liverpool are much more patient now, and a big part of that is about being able to control games a little bit more. So the idea is that they keep the ball at the back, they move it around side to side, they try and create these openings that they can then exploit, and then they'll only go forward and play the risky, direct attacking passes when they feel the moment's right, which is very different from what Klopp was doing. Right? With Klopp, it was very much, we play the forward pass first when we can, because we have the ability to win the ball back if we lose it and then generate chances from that. It's a bit more chaotic, it's a bit more intense, but it is more risky, and as we saw, that results in more counterattacks hurting you. That means that the fullback role has to change a little bit. So this is a quote from Slot talking on Sky Sports earlier in the season. So he talks about if the fullbacks are all down the line and you have to play the fullback, then he's very far away from some other players and it takes really long to get the ball over there. So what he's essentially saying is that if you have the fullbacks a long way apart from the rest of your build-up unit, you're going to actually slow down your build-up because it's going to take longer for the passes to reach them. So if you're playing closer to each other, the ball goes faster from one foot to another, and that gives less time for the opponent to defend. So the idea is that he wants to possess the ball in deeper areas for longer before launching these direct attacks. And that means he doesn't want, as Klopp can do, his fullbacks to get really high up the field, right? And be creative in those wide areas, or Alexander-Arnold coming into that half space. He wants those players to stay a little bit deeper because he wants to be able to have short distances between all of his build-up units. And yeah, as we saw, you can spread the centre-backs wide, have the goalkeeper coming in. Again, that's short distances between, and you can push your fullback slightly further forward, but you don't ever want to lose the connections between your fullbacks. Which I think maybe raises questions about bringing in players like Anthony Robinson or Milos Kirkes, because those guys are very much long busting runs down to the corner flag area, play crosses in from there or cutbacks, etc. And I think, as we've already said, Conor Bradley probably fits that profile a little bit. So it could be the case that Slot actually wants maybe a bit more of a technical build-up player on that side, because if Bradley is going up on this side, then you want to keep the other fullback in a little bit of connection with those. But I think it does raise some interesting questions about how Trent Alexander-Arnold was used this season, because if your creative player is being kept deeper in the field because you want to retain those connections, the question is, how do we bring him into play and get the most out of that creativity? JJ's already shown that Alexander-Arnold is playing perhaps as more of a traditional fullback, not inverting quite as much as he was 2% more. Although it's worth noting he didn't really do that much under Klopp, apart from in that last season and then 12 games before the end of the previous season. The big question is, how do you get the creativity out of someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold in these deeper lying moments? So here's an example from the game against Man City, Liverpool playing left to right. Here's Trent Alexander-Arnold on the ball. You can see, interestingly, he's deeper than Joe Gomez, the other central defender here. So really, really deep in the field. What Liverpool are going to try and do is possess the ball, maybe build up and try and create chances, or they can go direct, right? They still have the ability to utilise direct play when they see it as worthwhile. And it's very worthwhile when one of the players you have on the field is Mohamed Salah. So in this instance, what actually is happening is that Liverpool are trying to generate this moment where Salah is isolated against Nathan Ake here. Create space for him to run in behind. You've got an incredible ball player in Trent. You've got an incredible transition attacker in Salah. Utilise those two things. Yes, you might lose the ball playing this way, but the upside that you get from utilising these guys' strengths is I think outweighed by the possibility of losing the ball and the goalkeeper having it. So this is what happens, and Liverpool actually lean into this because the rest of the team, what they're going to try and do is pull their Man City counterparts out of the way to create this isolation. So you can see all the Liverpool players are running this way. You can see them dragging the City players with them, but actually Mohamed Salah, his body position is ready for him to run in behind to try and get momentum up on Nathan Ake. You've got Trent Alexander-Arnold. He can play that incredible ball in behind, and then you end up in this scenario where Salah is actually, in behind Ake. Ake actually has to do a really incredible challenge to stop this from being a really dangerous moment. So utilising Trent Alexander-Arnold in that deeper position, using his ball striking to still add value despite the fact that he is deeper in the field. The other thing that you can do is you can work the situation to get Trent Alexander-Arnold through those build-up phases into those dangerous areas where you want him to be. And this is another thing they can do in this direct play. So again, Liverpool in a build-up moment, you can see all the players are close together to control the ball. What's going to happen here is Konate is going to play the ball into Mohamed Salah because there's space here that Trent Alexander-Arnold can exploit. The ball comes in, Salah plays the ball back immediately to Alexander-Arnold into that space, and now you're in the sort of scenario. This could be a Jurgen Klopp game, right? With Alexander-Arnold in the half space, running and about to create, is able to get all the way to the edge of the area and then produce a pass for Luis Diaz, which results in a goal. So what Slot is doing is he's taking the qualities of the player that he has, fitting it within his system, but making the system work for the qualities of that player as well. And I think that's going to be the big question that we will have to ask about how they replace Trent Alexander-Arnold. Are they going to find a slightly different player to do that deep build-up stuff? What will their qualities be? How will we see them getting into different scenarios that actually emphasise their skill sets as well? So a bit more of a flexible approach to fixing a problem of a player leaving, not necessarily thinking we need to do like for like. What we can do is we can bring in an excellent player who does the things that we need to, which is the deep build-up stuff. But if they've got other qualities, can we find ways of bringing them into the game as well?
Thanks for that, John. Appreciate it. Well, if you've got any more questions about how and who could be replacing Trent Alexander-Arnold, well, we've done a lot of work for you. Head over to The Athletic right now. Click the link in the description. Names like Pedro Porro, Frimpong are all in there. Right, let's move on because it's now time to hear what Phil Hay has to say from the world of football.
The Barcelona we're talking about here are not to be mistaken with the giants of Europe. Barcelona SC are a more modest club altogether, from Ecuador in South America. The head coach is Segundo Castillo, who I'm dubbing the greatest showman. He turned heads earlier this season by appearing on the touchline in a nice white tuxedo. He turned heads even further this week by stepping out in a lovely pink number for a Copa Libertadores tie away at River Plate in Argentina. Style guru though he is, I don't see Castillo's dress code catching on, but somebody really should get this guy onto Broadway. If you want more tidbits like this, and all the big storylines from the world of football, Monday to Friday, sign up to the Athletic FC newsletter. It's free, and you can join us by clicking on the link below.
Well, John, we've discussed what losing Trent Alexander-Arnold might mean to Liverpool, but Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah look like they're staying. How will this affect Liverpool next season?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question as well, because Mohamed Salah and Virgil van Dijk, another couple of seasons, it's looking like, which is great for Liverpool, great for their fans. Massive. But also I think that we shouldn't be viewing this as, they've got away with it for the next 2 seasons. What they've bought is, I think, time to start solving the problems of, because these 2 guys aren't going to play forever, how do we start thinking of ways of replacing them now? And I think it's a really interesting one, because what we've seen from this season is Mohamed Salah has had probably the most impactful season in the Premier League amongst any sort of elite.
Can you replicate it next season though? He's a year older.
Right, yeah. But the thing is that he's in terms of goal involvement's just had an incredible season. Yeah. So on this graph here, you can see 50% involvement in his team's goals. 10% higher than the next closest in Isak at Newcastle. At one point this season he was at 62%,
That's
which is
insane.
Yeah, really, really incredible season. I think as well, we look at the threat that's coming from him. 54 goal involvements is mind-blowing, especially when you tot up the on the other side, you've got Gakpo and Diaz playing on the left wing. If you tot up their goal involvements, it comes to 40, which is still 14 less than Salah is on now. The problem with this, I suppose, is that it does raise the question of skew. When you have a player as good as Mohamed Salah, the temptation is to play through him all the time, right? He's going to be the guy who's going to change the game in that way. And there's, I think, maybe questions about Liverpool maybe becoming too right side dominant. We've seen the same happening from Arsenal. I think that's probably more to do with, I mean, again, you've got Bukayo Saka there,
Similar.
right? So it makes sense. But the big question, I think, is always, how do you make your team more threatening? Well, you make yourself dangerous on both sides of the field. If we look at this visualisation here, we can see, again, Mohamed Salah just standing out. So this is the way that Liverpool have entered the box this season. So on the one side, we've got carries. Unsurprisingly, Mohamed Salah doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Well, I guess lifting is probably not the right word when it comes to carrying and lifting.
Carrying,
there we go.
Carrying feels good.
You can see that most of it's coming through him, much less coming through Diaz on the other side. And then when it comes to passes and crosses, again, you've got that right side problem, because not only have you got Salah doing a lot of the creative passing into the box, and I think that's been an underrated aspect of his season. Like some of the assists that he's generated from those wide areas have been incredible. You've also got Trent Alexander-Arnold on that side as well, so like a double whammy of creativity on that side. Yes, we've got Robertson on the other side, but again, just nowhere near the sort of combined level of Salah and Alexander-Arnold, who are like well over 300. The big question is, how do you make yourself more dangerous on the left-hand side of the field? Because despite the fact that it's very hard to play against Mohamed Salah, teams know that that's where the threat's going to come from, down that side. I think this presents a tactical problem for Slot that he'll want to solve by introducing more threat on the other side. We've already talked about how maybe Liverpool could bring in a left-sided fullback who is able to invert a bit more, to push McAllister up, to give you a little bit more, I guess, creative coverage on that side. These are the sorts of questions that I think keeping Mohamed Salah is going to prompt for Slot. Yes, it's great we've got him for a longer period. How can we start increasing the threat on the other side so that when Salah does go, we've already started solving that problem from a creative point of view?
Okay, what about Virgil van Dijk?
Yeah,
35. That's a big age.
It is.
Everything starts squeaking at 35. Can he keep doing it?
I can confirm that things start going wrong when you're 35.
Make it till 40, mate. It's already gone wrong. It's done. But what about Virgil? What's he saying?
Well, so Virgil van Dijk, again, another incredible season. A big part of that, I think, is just the presence that he has in the box as a defensive figure. Box defending are really, again, it's easy to sort of undervalue these things, because you think box defending, everyone does it, right? Bad teams do it. Yeah. So, that's the sort of thing that you expect your teams at the bottom of the table to be doing. But box defending is super important for elite sides as well. Part of the reason why Liverpool have been so good this season is that Van Dijk and Konate have just been impossible to break down in those moments when you have got them defending their own box. But I do think that when you're thinking about how do you replace someone like Van Dijk, again, it presents you with these sorts of problems where you think, how on earth are we going to match the output of this guy in a box defending sense? And I think, well, the way that you should be thinking about this isn't necessarily how do we find a like-for-like replacement. It should be, he's being put under a lot of pressure in the box. How do we reduce the amount of pressure he's being put under? That means we can bring in a centre-back who maybe isn't quite so dominant from a box defending point of view, with maybe other qualities that you can have there as well. Again, thinking in terms of spreading qualities around the team. I think one thing we've seen this season from Liverpool is that they've had issues with their high press. As JJ said in his part, Slot's Liverpool do like to press high up the field, or at least like to block high up the field. What you see from them is they form this sort of 4-2-4 shape, and the 4-2-4 shape is really nice when you're playing up against teams who can actually build out from the back. So I'm just going to throw
more tokens in.
Yeah, more tokens. These are players. We'll call these players.
Okay.
So you got your back four and then a double pivot that we're playing against here. Now, Liverpool use this 4-2-4 shape. It's really nice because the team building up, you can have this nice compact front line of four who stop any of these passes going through into the middle. So you stop any sort of central build-up. And then if the ball goes out wide, you've got nice access in these wide players. Everyone can jump across and cover them. And then with these pivot players in the middle, now the pivot players for teams who are doing build-up, the reason why they're called pivots is because they are pivotal. Like they're important. They sort of dictate the play, the tempo, the direction of the build-up. And so you need to make sure that you have good coverage on them. And as you can see in this formation, there's really nice coverage on those pivots. You've got 6 players in a sort of hexagonal shape. Hexagonal? Yeah, around them, stopping them from having too much coverage. But the problem is that these players who are covering the double pivots actually also have responsibilities elsewhere. Gravenberch actually likes to drop in deep and help out in certain situations. McAllister is often tracking a central midfielder, and then the front four can push up onto the opposition back four. And what this means is that at times these two pivot players can actually get disconnected. So Liverpool don't cover them well enough. And so a smart team can actually work the ball around, create these sorts of openings so that eventually they can find the ball into the middle, and then Liverpool have to drop back and box defend. Okay, so what we're saying here is if your high press doesn't work well enough, you're probably going to be doing a bit more box defending. So keep that in mind, that's important. I'm just going to show you an example of this.
All right.
So this is an example from Fulham.
Yeah.
So Fulham in the build-up phase over here. And you can see 4-2-4 shape from Liverpool that we've been talking about. And you can see all of the players are sort of between everyone else, right? So you've got Jota can come up into the goalkeeper or the centre-back. These guys can jump. The two wide players can jump wide. You've got McAllister side on because he realised he's dropping onto the midfielder here, Pereira, and also responsible for Berger here. And then you've got Gravenberch who'll sometimes drop deep because Anthony Robinson will get high. So that's the situation. Really nice coverage of the pivot, as we've said, but external responsibilities as well. So the question is, what happens when the opposition start trying to move it around and create space? So the ball goes out to Calvin Bassey, and you can see Liverpool jump into a man-to-man phase. So Salah's coming out wide onto the winger. Szoboszlai's up onto the centre-back, as we've said. Gravenberch is jumping up onto the pivot player on that side, and then Jota is coming across here. But at the same time, Gravenberch is tracking Pereira because he doesn't want to have a free ball into this space. But as you'll notice, what's starting to happen is a bit of disconnect happening around Sander Berge. And what ends up happening in this sequence of play is that Fulham are able to move it back to the other side, the fullback over here, Castagna. And because everyone has now been disconnected from Berge here, he's actually managed to find a little bit of space. Pereira is going to drag McAllister out here and create space in here. We've got Gravenberch who's worried a little bit about Robinson over here, and what ends up happening is that Berge receives the ball with space to run into. McAllister's pulled out the way, Gravenberch hasn't caught up with the play, and in the end, Berge can run all the way down the field to this point where he can lay the ball into the fullback. Now Liverpool are dropping into box defend mode. So their front press hasn't worked well enough, now they're doing box defending. Why is this important for Virgil van Dijk? Well, because what we're saying here is if your front press isn't as good, I mean, you are going to end up in more of these moments, so you're going to be put under more pressure in those sorts of scenarios. Slot knows this. This is a quote from earlier in the season by a Leverkusen game. Liverpool had just played Brighton, who played through their front press quite a bit. He explains why this happened. He says, you want to be very aggressive without the ball. Maybe sometimes we're a bit too aggressive, we get a bit too high. If you're just a fraction too late, you can open a certain lane and the opposition can play through you, which is what we saw Fulham doing just there. But he says, the good thing is that I always see my players running back really hard to prevent the other team from getting a chance. Because although we felt that Brighton was the better team in the first half, it wasn't like they had 3 or 4 chances from open play. So that shows me that even if they play through our first press, we're still able to not concede that many chances. It's a perfectly legitimate way of playing. If you feel as though your team can absorb those transitional moments, then it's fine to play that way. But I would suggest that part of the reason why they're so good at absorbing those moments is because they've got a player like Virgil van Dijk. You get rid of Virgil van Dijk, would that mean that they would be put under more pressure in these moments? Now, the solution to that would be, well, let's make sure we've got a really good box defender, right? But you want your centre-back to do other things. You want to build up from deep. You want to control the play. So you need a guy who's going to be great under pressure at building up, whilst also being great under pressure in box defending moments. That's a unicorn player. That's why we're talking about Virgil van Dijk in this way. I would suggest that a better solution here might be, or partial solution, is to think, well, how do we improve our front press so that we're not opened up as much? Because if we do that, then whoever we bring in is going to be put under less pressure. So then we don't need a guy necessarily who's going to be elite at box defending, but we could get a really elite youngster coming through who is really good at the build-up stuff. And that changes the sorts of profiles that you're looking for, makes it easier for you to do that. So again, we're thinking about ways of spreading around risks, spreading around qualities of your team, finding tactical solutions to mean that what you need in certain areas is different. And I think, again, that's probably what Liverpool could do this season, even with Van Dijk still there. How do we improve our front press, our high press, to stop it from leading to as many of these dangerous attacking moments? And if we can do that, then we're taking the pressure off having to find an elite centre-back to replace Virgil van Dijk from the very off.
Wow. Liverpool technically have 3 unicorn players. That's actually insane. How do you replace 3 unicorn players? I don't know. Unicorns don't technically exist. Well, so John's kind of described how Liverpool can be less dependent on players like Mo Salah. But what else might Arne Slot have to think about next season that he hasn't already dealt with this season?
Well, one of the things that will probably happen this summer is that he'll bring in his own players and start to develop or implement more of his own ideas.
Yeah.
So it looks like he wants to be more patient, and at the moment he's gone from transitioning from a very chaotic Jurgen Klopp style team into what he's now got. And there's a chance he might want to be even more patient and controlled. And so whoever he brings in has to be of, first of all, the correct level, which, as John has identified, is incredibly hard to do. And one of the things Jurgen Klopp did so well at Liverpool was bring in elite star players, which don't really exist. Liverpool didn't get lucky with it. It's through clever recruitment they managed to get these in. But if you don't get the same level of player, you don't have the same level of team. And the same thing, the group that Slot inherited were already a group, as a unit. They've had time to bond, so there was no need to have an awful long time to put new things in. He didn't change it, he evolved it slightly. So that's one of the things. But we see, if he does make them more patient, what he still needs to do is get more points. Because you see, the average needed to win the league is, I think it's 89.5 points. Well, basically that's what Man City have averaged. So when Man City are competing properly, they tend to get an average of 89.5 points.
And they've set the bar up there. Okay.
That's what it is. That's in a Guardiola world. That's what you have. And when he's not there, everything changes. So Liverpool are predicted, according to Opta, to get 87.5 points, which is good enough to finish second a lot of time. They would, they're sort of around it, but it's an exceptional season. Because next season, Man City, I don't think will be as poor as they are this season. Arsenal probably won't have as many injuries, you'd hope.
Hopefully.
Maybe not. Who knows? So they dropped off. Man United are gone. Chelsea are not great at the moment. Spurs are Spurs. So basically what you've got are no other title challengers. Not to take away from Liverpool's achievements, because they've earned it by doing what they're doing. But last season they were already really good. They finished with 82 points, so it's a slight improvement, but it's like 2 wins of an improvement. So how do you possibly get to the level after that? You bring in better players. Do they exist? Does Slot style work better than what Klopp's did? We don't know. 87 points gets you second place most of the time these days. So even in a Guardiola, like without Guardiola, you'd still need to get these extra points that are coming in. So he needs to find better players, perhaps, that can improve the team but play more like he wants, and hope that that is the right way to do it. Because as you develop on top of someone else's tactical style, you'll have certain remnants of it, like the intensity and the aggression, that might then start to dissipate and become slightly more diluted. And maybe that's not as good as what it was before. At the moment, you've got the perfect blend of control and chaos, which is very hard to get together.
Nice. Well, that was nice, wasn't it? Thanks for that, gents. JJ, John, see you soon.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.